Thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate you stopping by. Before I start, I just want to explain who I am and where I'm coming from and why I was offered to present here, which I'm very thankful for. So I always wanted to be an architect and design since I was a little kid. I went to architectural school, then I worked for a design development company in healthcare, then went to work for a developer for 11 years. When I worked there, I was VP of Design Development. So anything that came in from idea to completion fell in my lap. Whether it was environmental, architecture, tier design, low voltage, master planning, sites, assemblages, skyscrapers, variances, dealing with subways, Amtrak, any other hindrances or hurdles that came across, including your standard design and construction. So about 10 years ago, I took all that knowledge and created a company off it, because most people are owner's reps on the construction side, but there's no owner's reps on the design side. There's no one really hiring your architect for you, your interior designer for you, your low voltage, your millwork guy, all those, and pulling it all together to make sure you have a complete project. So that's where I'm coming from to present here. Now, what's in the title? So we have here, the title was cut off a little bit on the thing they handed out, but the top is selling confidence. So why did I add the word selling confidence here? You want confidence in everything that you do. Why over here would confidence apply more than anything else in school? So the biggest thing here is that most people
Instacart delivery.
don't have
Copy.
what they don't know building. They know budget, they know education, they know kids, they know teachers, they know grants, they know all the things that apply to them. But building a building, they just don't know. It's not what they deal with on a daily basis. So the selling confidence part is to get that information and be informed so you can sell with confidence. What I mean by sell with confidence is that when you go to a large donor and you want to sell the building, you want to get him to put $2 million, put his name on top of it, how are you going to sell it to him for this building if you don't know the design? You don't know, you're not confident that I have the right amount of classrooms, I have the right amount of resource enrichment, my ceiling heights are the right, I put in enough hotspots outside, inside, I've done, playgrounds, all those things that come up, questions you might ask you. How are you going to have the confidence to sell that thing? Same thing with a parent body, right? You go to a parent and say, listen, we're building all these classrooms, and the parent's going to say, sure you need it? Or are the classes getting bigger? Why is that? So that's also something that you have to sell to a parent, and you need the confidence to do it. And you can go down the line, your clientele, which are all your teachers, whether it's resource enrichment, whether it's your staff, your security. When you are building a new building, you have to be confident to tell all those people, we're doing this because this is what we need, this is what's right, and therefore, you have the confidence to do it. And the last person that really has to sell is to yourself. That you have to be confident to yourself that every time you go into a meeting for design, and anytime you go into a meeting with construction, with any version of design here in development, you have to go to that meeting and say, I'm confident that this is what I need. I need this on the second floor, I need this on the first floor, I need this size of whatever you're designing. So that's where the confidence part comes in, selling it to yourself. Moving forward, so this is something that comes up a lot, is, okay, I'm an executive director, director of development, I am the CFO, CEO, whatever title in the C-suite that you are, all of a sudden I have to take on building a project. How is it that I wasn't hired for this? I don't know how to do it. How is it that all of a sudden it became my job to build a building, to design a building? I don't know what architect to hire. I don't know if he's doing a good job. Why me? Maybe we should hire someone else. Maybe we should get another employee into the school to do it. How is it that I pick it up? And the issue that we have a lot is that since a person has to take it on, someone has to take it on, either it gets passed around, like sometimes the dean's running it, then the next week the principal's running it, and the next week the executive director is running it, and anyone who's hired outside, an architect, is getting information from different people. So if you have an architect that is being told, I need 6 classrooms with 25 kids, and then next week it's 8 classrooms with 20 kids. So you can't get to the next step because the information is being given from all over. And the project just keeps on going, costs keep on going, time keeps on going, and therefore the project doesn't move. So the first part that we're going to speak about here is the U. Whether the U is an executive director, whether the U is the dean, the principal, usually it falls out on the executive director to do it. That's usually what happens, and I'm sorry to say, but someone has to take it on. So that's usually who does it. And that person, the executive director, usually hires other people so he can give his main tasks over to that person while they're doing a building project. A building project could take anywhere from 2 years to 10 years. It really depends on the level of building that you're doing, quantity, whether you're doing a building to campus, and we'll talk about that. But the biggest thing here is you have to figure out who's running the project. Very, very important. Leading into it, this is how, it gets to the next point. So when whoever that person is, we're going to use executive director as that person, but let's say the executive director is responsible to build this project. And what happens is he has board members, and he also has a chairman of the board, he has a president of the school, there's all these different people that are pushing him to do it. Then they push and say, listen, we should get a building committee together. Let's get 2 guys, 5 guys, 10 guys, or women, either way, and let's figure out how to build this project. So now you're answering to the people in the school, and you're answering to board members. Now you have a building committee. And then, what also happens is you have sometimes large donors. They like to squeeze their way in and say, $1 million, I want this to happen. $2 million, I even want this to happen. And sometimes they come across that a $2 million donor says, I don't want that donor on my side of the building, he should be on the other side of the building. And there are times that we've had where I had to split buildings because the front facade had one donor, but there were 2 big donors. So how do you do that? So you have to split the building for neighbors. So now you have a huge committee of people that you're dealing with. So not only is it not your job, and now all of a sudden it is your job, but all of a sudden you have to deal with so many more people regarding this project. So design by committee versus death by committee is a very important thing to pay attention to. Because I'm going to take one part, which is the building committee first, and we'll break it down. On most of my projects, there is a building committee. And it usually is 3 to 4 people. And what happens is, everyone's gung-ho, everyone's excited, everyone's ambitious, we're going to do this building, we're going to get the money, get the parents behind it. And then, as the months go on, they disappear. They fade away. All of a sudden, your emails are not being answered, your questions are not being answered, but they're the building committee. You're supposed to answer. You volunteered for this, which is the key word we're going to discuss in a second. So now, your job that you had, you were sharing the responsibility among other people. All of a sudden, you're slowly gaining more of that responsibility, and more importantly, your responsibility of decisions is getting bigger and bigger. Because now you can't turn to the guy that supposedly has construction experience, or the guy that works in development, or the guy that once built a building 20 years ago that supposedly you could turn to for everything. All of a sudden, they're not there to help you anymore. So building committees, while they're great, there are a few schools that the building committee they're in, and they're available, and they come to every meeting, they're on phone calls, yes, but a lot of times they fade away. So when you do build building committees, if there's a way for them to understand how much they're going to be investing in, how much are they going to, I mean, on some projects, we have a conference call once every 2 weeks. They come onto the call, they want to hear what's going on, they want to hear high-level decisions, high-level budget, where we're up to, on our expenditure, and then they go off. And they make comments on, whether, okay, we could get more money for this, or do we need this? And they're okay with it. And as long as you're okay with that, and there's no expectations that the building committee is taking on so much work and so much, responsibility, you're okay with it. So let's move on to board members. So board members are hard in their own way because they are actually vested in the school, and they're vested in everything that else is going on in the school, whether it's your budget, whether it's meeting your goals for the next year, things like that. So if you're over on the building, or you're not moving fast enough, then they're gonna kill you. So it's very important that board members are, I would say, more updated than involved. Because they're not gonna, at the end of the day, all the people we're talking about, whether it's donors, building committee, board members, at the end of the day, they're volunteers. You're a paid employee, they're volunteers. They could say, I volunteered, but I'm busy, I have phone calls, family, vacation, I can't do it. I had board members that started off with, there's some schools on that have 12 board members, 15 board members. And I've been in meetings with 12 and presented. The next meeting there's 8, so meetings there's 4, and then now I'm down to 1 or 2 that I update. So the same thing for you. You have to be ready for that you have to inform them, but to rely on them to be part of this is going to be hard. Okay, so we spoke about the confidence. The confidence is the confidence of understanding the project. The confidence of understanding the project. So, I'm going to go for each of these things. Now, we just spoke about board members and donors and building committee. You have to be able to answer to all these exactly what's going on. If you go, and I've been in these meetings where executive directors and whoever else is running the show does not understand what's going on, and what happens, the anger or the disapproval shows on the face. So therefore, you really have to be up to date in what the architect's doing, interior designer, everyone, where the project is, where the budget is, what the schedule is, whether it's during design or during construction. You have to make sure that you're up to date. It can't be that you go back to your regular job, focused on that, okay, I'm going to check in, and then I'm going to check out, and then check in and check out. It can't work like that. Because you wouldn't do that for things in your school, and this is one of the biggest expenditures you'll ever have in a school. Whether it's 10 million or 50 million, this is a big thing. And you keep on going down this list here, and it's really confidence along the way. There are projects that I've gone through where a person approves something in the beginning, it looks happy, it looks great, everything looks good, but then the project continues, right? You have to move walls for ductwork, you have to move walls for structure, you have to change things for code and zoning. So they keep reissuing drawings, reissuing interior design. But if you check out and said, I approved it in the beginning, if you don't keep on looking at it, it's a problem. You have to make sure that not only are you tuned in the beginning, that you're continuously tuned in through the project. Another thing that happens, which is also because of the tuned in and tuned out part, is that everyone has these crazy responsibilities. But what happens is they try to kick down the road things that they feel is not important now. So let's say low voltage is a frequent one that people kick down the road. It's just wires. Why do I need to pay attention to them? It's a hot spot on the ceiling. It's a camera on the wall. Why do I have to pay attention to it now? So one big thing is budget. If you don't think about it now, all of a sudden, you're $200,000 more than you didn't think about. So your budget is busted. Another thing is, which the voltage people like to do, is they want to have rooms. Not only rooms in the cellar, but rooms on every floor. Big room in the cellar, small rooms as you go up. Therefore, it takes space. All of a sudden, you had a perfect classroom, and now you got to cut out a little corner for a low voltage valve, which you didn't think about. Now, you got to put in an exhaust fan for it because you don't want it to overheat. So the fact that you kick low voltage down the road, it hurts you. Another big one is millwork and furniture, which is a big number in a project of a school. Depends what age, but preschool, you have a lot of different things in the room that you're dealing with. When it gets to elementary school, it's all the cubbies. When it gets to high school, it's the lockers outside, besides all the desks that you're dealing with. And then when you add all the ancillary rooms, lunchroom, library, resource and enrichment, which is a big one, all of a sudden, you didn't pay attention to it. You had a number in the beginning, $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever the number is. But you didn't pay attention to it, you didn't refine the design. So what happens? Once again, your budget is broken. And now you have to refine stuff, because let's say you want a certain amount of cubbies, a certain amount of lockers, but then the ones you actually picked are bigger than the ones that were designed. So now you're losing space. Or if you didn't speak to the principal that they wanted a coat hook, a briefcase hook, they wanted Hebrew storage, they wanted English storage. It depends if you're in Florida or if you're in New York, whether they have coats, they don't have coats. You know, whether they wanted a library in the room or not in the room. And all these things continue to bust your budget and also wreak havoc on your design. So the biggest thing to do is not kick things down the road. One more thing that gets kicked down the road is kitchen design, which we'll speak about a little bit later. Another thing I want to talk about is visiting other projects. So what happens is people go to other projects. It depends on your personality. You go to one school and you'll love it. And what are you going to say? You're going to say, I want that. I like what they did. Let's do that. Then a month later, you're going to go to another school and say the same thing. I want what they did. And you're going to keep on going. Some people don't visit schools. I have one project that the design is done, and they just decided to start visiting schools. It's done. Interior design is done. Architecture is done. Everything's done. And then we sat down to finalize it. The principal, who was a little checked out, is now checking in, tuning in, and saying, oh, but I saw in that school that they had this type of table and this type of room, and all of a sudden we're moving walls. We're moving walls in the teacher's lounge. We're moving walls in the resource room. All of a sudden, it's not, they're telling me to do it. So what happens? I have a change order. The HVAC guy has a change order. The architect has a change order. The interior designer has a change order. All of a sudden, besides the cost of what's been doing here, everyone has a change order because they waited to visit the school. They waited to make their decisions. They waited to challenge it, to go, to ask questions, speak to different designers. Therefore, it's very important also for the same thing, not to do this. To visit all the schools, ask the questions, take notes, and figure out what you really want. So that's the process. And if you understand the process and you're confident and you don't have death by committee, then you're good. Okay, now we're going to switch gears. Now we're switching gears to the how. We spoke about the who, and now we're going to switch gears to the how. Before I continue, does anyone have any questions on the who?
Well, just, I'm used to sitting here, and he gave a session just before on security.
Yes.
And not to promote him, but just the concept was, you talked about all these change orders and all these other issues that get involved. Have the hook here, have the also the same thing with security.
I have it on my list further
Okay,
down on the
very
slide.
good.
No problem. Anyone else have any questions on the who? Okay, so let's continue. So this is something that I started with my company, and it's very, I don't want to say proprietary, but very specific. So there's 6 things here. These 6 things are what you need to move to the next level. You don't have these things, you're starting off on the bad foot. So I'm going to go through each of these things. Some of them are simple, and some of them are very important that if you don't have them and you're not signed and sealed on it, it's a problem. Now, just keep in mind, all these things are allowed to change a little bit. 10%, 15%. You're allowed to have that change. Not an issue. But some projects that have 50% change, that's what the issue is. So let's go through that. So the programmatic reports, that's the key. What is that? That is analyzing the current needs that you have, the future needs that you have once the building opens, and then the growth needs that you have in 5 years in the future. What does this mean? So I go into school and I ask them, and they know right away, they know how many students. That's like easy. Everyone knows, okay, I have this amount of classes, this amount of students. But when we start getting into the nitty-gritty of resource enrichment, which is usually the scheduling and the amount of teachers in every school, people do not know. There are schools that I've gone into that there are rooms sitting empty for hours and hours because no one correlated all the schedules of the resource enrichment. And therefore, when you go to design, they're like, I need 25 rooms of resource enrichment. But when you analyze it, they really only need 7 if they would schedule properly, understand all the people that are coming into the school and coming out of the school. So when I start a project, the program that usually happens with an architect is a page or 2. After I come in, it's usually 25 pages of information. And we go through every class, how many students, teacher. Then we go into the room itself. How many cubbies, teacher storage, whiteboards, corkboards, smartboards. We go into libraries, we go into the corridors and we say, okay, you want shadow boxes, you want LCD screens, LED screens, donor walls. We go through every last detail. We go to the office suite, we go to the administrative suite, we go to the education suite. And we go through every single employee, which is the second thing, I'm gonna mix them together. We go through every single employee and non-employee that walks into that school. At any point, that means the security team, that means deliveries, that means maintenance, that means kitchen, that means any therapist, whether it's hired from in the school or hired from out of the school. Go through every single use in the building, whether a lunchroom is rented out for an event or it's used only for the school. What sports is being used. You go through janitor's closets, you go through bathrooms, you go through staff bathrooms, you go through kitchen, everything you want in the kitchen, kitchen storage. You go through a show, whether it's a boys or girls, but you have a show. What grade is the show for, right? So 5th grade, you sometimes have different, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th. It depends how you're split up. Middle school, elementary school, whether they're mixed together, separate buildings. Whether preschool is attached, not attached. And you go through all these different levels of items because, once again, when you come to design, if you don't have this information, you're building without knowing. And then what happens is, yes?
So, I hear what you're saying, but once again, it goes back to who you're having a conversation with.
Yes.
This is an executive director's conference.
Yes.
If you have the same conversation at Prisma, principals will have a completely different conversation with you. To me, the best example you gave was the 25 rooms.
Okay.
Why? Because the principals are giving out favors to each of the therapists coming in, and they each get their own office. The executive director looks at it like, are you out of your mind? We just made 14 additional rooms when we didn't do that. But then there's that real trade-off of who's really coming into the room and having this conversation with you about, you could have, from the principal's point of view, no, I never want to rent this place down. It doesn't work for me. From the executive director's point of view, of course I want to rent the place out. It's an additional source of income. And you know what, when we build it, we're going to actually build it so we can have our mitzvahs and school a little bit bigger than the school needs and the principals that you're talking about. So that really doesn't get back to your question when that principal, tunes in?
So I'll veer for a second to answer your question. So at the end of the day, when I come in, I interview every single person that we deem as high level. So whether it's the head security person, the head of resource enrichment, the head of each division. Then we gather all information, and then we sit down with the decision maker. That decision maker, plus myself, we say, this is crazy, this makes sense. Are you really doing this? No. And then we refine it to what, not only design what you want versus what you need, but also what you can afford. And you'll see later, I'll go through that. But all those decisions, yes, the executive director, if he asks random people, yeah, I want the best thing, I want the biggest closet in the world. I want a desk that can hold everything for the entire next 10 years. that. Especially the lower grades, you know, preschool and first and second, they tend to hoard a lot. So what happens?
How do you balance that? Because they have real needs.
So the question is, what's a real need, and what's just saving everything I've ever
And I
used?
guess also how do you talk to them saying this is not like.
So a lot
Are you
of
in a Masifta or a day school?
Day school.
Okay, so that's a big difference. In a Masifta, it's the law.
For sure.
And in a day school, you have board, or officers, or whatever, right? Isn't that really how you get to the bottom line?
right. So part of that is that
Making one story somewhere else.
right, but part of that is actually right. You have to make a firm decision and take ownership of the project and say, no, this is what we're doing. And I've had that. I've had one project. I had a person that was hoarding, but they do a lot of projects, they do a lot of music, but then we gave them a nice office and said that's it. And I'm gonna say something which is not on my slide, but I usually present it through it. Is that when there's a change, which is a building, and once you have change everything. Because once the person feels like, okay, I'm moving, I gotta move stuff, I gotta change stuff, I gotta throw a little more change, and then give the parameters and say, this is what's happening. You're with us or you're without us. You have to do that. You have to exert authority and say, these are the parameters of where it's gonna be. Because everyone can't get everything. There's a finite amount of space and there's a finite budget. So you have to keep that. You have to see what's more important. And when we do the reports, by the way, and people see it, there's usually like 2 to 3, even 4 versions of the report. Because when people see it on the paper, they're trying to figure out what's more important. What's the hierarchy here? A larger lunchroom, or larger resource enrichment, or bigger principal's office? You're never going to get anything. Just like in a house, you're never going to get anything. And I do houses, I do a lot of other projects besides schools. You're just never going to get anything. Everything. You have to figure out what's important. So next, I just want to just talk about the important breakdowns a little bit more. So when I go into schools, a lot of times they don't have an employee breakdown of what each person comes in, what exactly each person does, and therefore what the needs are for all these people. Whether it's offices, cubicles, open desks, individual offices, grouped offices, whether they sit in a room with the children, like resource enrichment, or security, booth, is it 1 guard, 2 guards, 3 guards, or the inside or the outside. So getting the employees right, very, very important. Make sure that the design is correct. And then another thing we do, just to add on, to make it easier for the architect, is we give a room list. We list every single room that's going to be in your building. Janitor's closets, IT closets, kitchen storage, delivery rooms, anything that you're going to get and you want has to be on the list. You can't make assumptions. You can't pretend like everyone's going to know your specific operation. And
How do you always know what you want?
What?
How do you always know what you need? There's a lot of things that a lot of executive directors never built a building before, so they don't know all these various rooms that they're going
I
to need.
understand. That's why I'm in business. But either way, basically what it is, you have to jump in. You have to jump in. What do I have now? What am I missing now? Hear from the problems of the teachers and the staff, the back of house staff, which is very important. Your maintenance guy. What's his issues? What's breaking? What doesn't have space for? Things like that. Right, it's very important. The right side is a little more mainstream, which is a survey, which interestingly, people don't always know what they own. So a survey shows you what you own. Everyone says I have this property, but they don't realize that the neighbor's garage or the neighbor's building is over their property, and therefore it's an issue with zoning. So getting a survey is very important to know what you own, especially when you're dealing with multiple properties. You got to keep that in mind. I'm just going to skip the borings for a second. Borings is important for structure, but it's only important for one thing at the beginning, is where the water table is. If you want to do a basement and you have a high water table, you can't build that basement unless you want to spend a crazy amount of money. So that's what it's for. You don't have to do so many, you just have to do one to see where the water is. Very, very important, especially in places like Long Island. Very important.
Then Sandy,
What?
then Sandy comes.
Yeah, exactly.
You also have to take into consideration that there are things that if you have an older building, you were quote unquote grandfathered in. Once you change those, any layout of that, it can ripple into a domino effect. Such as our building at one point didn't have to have, let's say, sprinkler heads. And once we changed and added a gym, suddenly because we added footage, we had to outfit the entire building, and that's a cost that we weren't anticipating. Or when you're redoing the auditorium, suddenly, you know, our old auditorium didn't have lifts for wheelchair accessibility. Suddenly we had to spend an exorbitant amount of money adding a lift, which again was not.
Correct. So that applies to anything ADA, which is what's on the list,
Right.
anything fire and life safety, and sometimes with parking also. If you have square footage, then your parking, which takes away from your land, if you have, and then you have to go for variance if you don't. So yes, having an existing building triggers a lot of other things that I'm not up to yet regarding that. Yes.
Do schools get ADA flexibility if they're religious institutions? That's only like synagogues and stuff like that.
It depends what municipality. There is law that you can't discriminate against religious, so you do get away with more. But, I mean, I do a lot of variances on Long Island. They've been pushing back really hard, especially, let's say, a shul that doesn't have any parking. What are you doing? You can't say, oh, on Shabbos we don't drive. They know. They know that before Shabbos and during the week, and so it's hard. Certain things you're not, like ADA, you can't get away with that.
Life safety and ADA would be opposite.
Right, fire, life safety, and ADA.
Like, so I wouldn't like.
Can't have the fire marshal.
Also
So
not
like
sure.
second floor, you can't say, hey, we don't need an elevator because we have enough classes on the first floor in order to serve the students that need it. You can like get away with that.
Anyone that's walking to that second floor needs an elevator.
But,
No matter if it's a student or anything.
but you could maybe have only things on there that people that don't need it, like just classrooms, and you can move around your classrooms. See, it's not really
It doesn't work like that. You need ADA and fire life safety for everything. Parking is what you could fight. You sometimes win, sometimes don't. Depends who's on the board and which municipality. But like he's saying, it's true. Once you open that Pandora's box, it can trigger anything.
by us, it's a certain square footage. Once you add it, it's considered a major change, and then you have to
It also, especially in Long Island, it affects FEMA also when you start triggering stuff.
I'm in New Orleans, familiar with FEMA.
What?
I'm in New Orleans, very familiar with FEMA.
Floods up. So yes, that triggers it also if you build a certain much, because if your building is not regulated for FEMA now, and all of a sudden, because it's before all the regulations,
Water runoff,
now you
things like
trigger it. Yeah, there's a lot of things that come with that. I mean, there's one project that in Long Island, we have to do floodgates and things like that because they're lower. Okay, the last thing is zoning analysis, which is figuring out, based on the survey, what you're allowed to build. It's really figuring out what's your max, not what you need or want. What's the biggest building I could build? Because then, you know the biggest, and you can dial back versus not knowing, and you want to add, and all of a sudden I'm maxed out. But I'm already halfway through the project, what do? So knowing the max you want to build without a variance is very, very important. Now having all this is huge confidence. You know what you need, you know all the employees, so you know all the uses, you know all the rooms, you know if you have water, you know what you own, and you know what you're allowed to build. This is the key to moving to the next step. If you start a project without this information, you're winging it a little bit, which a lot of people do, but you're winging it. And now, once you have this, one other thing you have to realize is that people are not really in tune always with the scale of their project. There are people that come to me with 10,000 square feet. There are people that come to me with 250,000 square feet, right? And whether it's broken down into buildings, whether it's a campus, and before they didn't have a campus. I'm doing one project, but they had one building, and we're adding 2 more buildings, and we're creating a campus. They didn't have a campus. But now they have to understand what a campus means. Security is a killer on a campus compared to one building, right? Instead of having one entrance, now you have 3 entrances. So now I have 3 security booths, more security guards, more cameras. How do I monitor all? How does dismissal reach all those different places? It's very important to understand the scale of your project. So you start off with what you were saying, the renovation, then you continue going, new addition, new building, multiple buildings, and then a full-on campus. So it's very important to know the scale because also it affects your project. A renovation of a building doesn't always mean it's cheaper because you don't know what you're dealing with. When you add floors, your footings might not be strong enough. when you add floors, like you said, you have to add a lot of other things. You have to sometimes demolish the guts of it to understand what you're building cast structure. Okay, the next thing is when we speak to clients, they know the students. They know, okay, the student goes from this class to this class, they have those periods, they go to lunch. They know this, usually know how the students work. But once we start discussing how everyone else comes into the building, they're not sure. So we designed one school we designed in Long Island. The parents could come into the lobby and then turn into the admin suite where the principal is and not have to go into the school. So let's say your kid's in trouble. You don't want to walk through the whole school and all of a sudden all your kids' friends see you and why, so your parents say, why are they here? So we put a separate door, a little side door, off the lobby so that parents could go in. It also depends on security. If someone's doing deliveries, are they doing it to the back of the building? Are they doing it to the front of the building? If you do it to the front of the building, you start damaging the front doors, right? Whether it's garbage that goes out the front doors, delivery, maintenance, you want to make sure that your lobby is pristine. So understanding how everyone is going to use this new building is very important. Is the loading dock in the back or just dropping off in front? Same with anyone else who's coming to the building. You have donors, what are they seeing when they come in? Are they coming only in front entrance or are there other entrances? We're doing a building now in Long Island that the lobby is sort of separate than the main structure. It's an add-on. The reason why we did that is that it's a campus. So half the school plus some donors and parents might come through the main school, this is the high school. They might come through the main school, or probably come through the main school sometimes if they're touring the whole campus, and then go into the back entrance of this high school. Versus the main entrance of the high school is on the street. So we did a double loaded entry to this lobby. So understanding, and therefore it's prestigious on both sides for donors, for the school trade, because you can sell both entrances. So that's a part that we get to the donors, but understanding where everyone is flowing through the building is very important besides the student body. And that goes, the standard list of everyone else.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
To go back to the previous slide, is this something you're suggesting that schools should be thinking about before they're meeting with their architects? I mean, as I hear you talking about this, I'm imagining, like many of the organizations here, we're also working on a project right now. And typically these are conversations that are either happening with the architects or the architects are the ones raising them. I mean, maybe they're not thinking about the perp walk, for your kid just messed up. That might be day school specific, but I'm just wondering, like, as was said here before, many of us, in addition to our jobs, this isn't what our expertise is, but it is their expertise. And it's also the owner's rep's expertise, I understand that. I'm just curious, where do you see these conversations happening? Like on the very ground floor, like the first meeting the architects come to, is this the list of questions they give you to think about, and then you go back as a committee, and then you send them back that info? Like where in the process do you see this happening?
Okay, so I'm gonna pause that question because I'll talk about it in the next slide. But no one's giving you a list. No one's giving you a list of answer all these questions. At least I haven't come across it. I ask all the questions. I have lists endlessly based on my experience, but no architect, as far as I know, that I've come across, I've hired a lot over my time, say, here, this is the school questionnaire, answer this, and then we'll go to the next stage. They just don't do that. So, to answer your question, I'll go through this and then I'll answer your question. So this goes through the entire design team. Now I want to go through the entire design team because you have to understand who you're hiring, who you're paying, who comes first, how they talk to each other, who's running the show. Very important. So we're going to go through the architect first. It's the first one on the gate after the people that we spoke about before regarding the sheets and the survey and the boards. So architect. I've hired a lot of architects in my time. I've hired a bunch in my time. Because you have to find an architect that you sync up with. You need that marriage that they're going to listen to you, you're going to listen to them, and you're going to collaborate. If you have an architect that says you must do this, you must do this, you must do this, and he doesn't give you the leeway to say, no, but in our school we do it this way. How can you do that? In every school they do it this way. It's not true. In my school I do it this way. You have to have an architect that works with you. The same thing, you can't have an architect that's a pushover. That, okay, no, we do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and he does it, and then it comes to the building being done, and all of a sudden things don't work because you said you wanted all this, and he's like, you told me I wanted it, so now that's it, I'm done. So it can't be too much to the extreme. So you have to find the right architect. When it comes to schools, very important to find an architect that has done schools. You can't use your local school architect. You can't use, a board member says, I use it for my house. Okay, let's do that. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I've fired architects because of it, and I've not hired architects because of it. Because at the end of the day, you have to get the job done. If I keep having to redline and critique and coordinate because they're using materials that they don't know. They're not doing ADA requirements because they're not familiar. They're not coordinating on a high level, it's a problem. There are projects that I even have 2 architects on, depending on what it is. There's one project I have a star architect and a school architect. Because the school architect is very low key, very technical, knows all the school stuff, and can deliver a good product. But for the donors, he's not going to get that excitement. He's not going to get that creativity. So yes, it's much harder on me to manage 2 architects versus 1. But we talked, we worked out the percentages, who's doing what. So far, so good. Very nice people, working together, very communicative.
If you're doing an expansion, how much value do you put on hiring the architect that did the original building?
Very little. If you're talking about a renovation,
For expansion on the building, like plugging in another part of
it
the
also
building.
depends on what
They're prior to my existence.
did the person before like them? Did they do a good design?
The building, I think, is a good building. The question is, they're a quality architect, they're more expensive than other ones, but there's a question if there's value in it.
I don't always look at dollars. Because you could spend a ton of money and get nothing. You could spend a little money and get a ton of value.
The question is if it's worth spending the more money to get that person because they have knowledge of the building or not.
It would have to be analyzed compared to the other architects you bid it out to, whether the design that was done is good, you like it, and then you can move on from there that they're a potential player. You have to check that out first. If you don't like what they did, then
That's obvious.
there's no must, right? Unless it's recent, unless they did variances, so they know what happened, and you want to continue getting variances. It's not a straight answer, but you'd have to analyze. So having that school architect is very important, and that is your first thing. So like I said, on that project, I hired 2 architects. So far, so good. I wouldn't recommend it a lot because it's a lot of it's a very, very, very large project, very complex. And not only that, another important thing to think about with an architect is who do they know? When you're going for variances, we were just talking, and you're going for, with any municipality, if your architect is new, he doesn't know the players, he's going to present. There's a lot of times that in my variances, an architect gets up to present, and the board members are they look upset. Because there's a certain way, every municipality, they know they want this drawing, they want it on the board, they want the architect to say a certain things in public, they want to, have copies beforehand, whatever, whether it's required or just stupidities. If your architect is not connected with what you're doing, it's going to be hard. So on this one where I connected 2 architects, the star architect knows everyone. Every last person. On the boards, politicians, every last person, that person knows. Worth his weight in gold. And the school architect will get everything else done. Putting those together is that. So knowing what your architect, who he knows, what his skills are, is important. Obviously, cost plays into it, and experience, but those are the key things. The next person is structural engineer and MEP engineers. So, if you have an AC one, you're good. The real play with structural engineers and MEP engineers is that they don't over-design. Because if they over-design, it will cost you crazy when you start doing construction. They do heavier beams, they overdo on the air conditioning, crazy stuff happens. So what?
Control systems.
Yeah, so, right, building controls, which usually go away because no one's paid for it. So, you have to have,
The first thing happens early on.
yeah,
The heavier beams unnecessarily can run you $500,000, $1 million. Nobody found out about till after
there's even other things. In New York City, you have to be able to cross the bridge with it. You have to schedule it, so then you have to cut it in half. It's not only just the weight, but also a heavy beam makes your columns heavier, which makes your footings heavier. Everything relates to cost when it comes to structure. Now, when you have this gorgeous fan, like we're looking out here, right, and the columns you have, this is important. And then what happens is how creative your engineers are is another big thing. Because, which I work part of engineering also a lot, is that you have to decide, is it worth it for me to throw in a column and all of a sudden I save 40 grand? Multiplied by how many rooms you have. We just did another project that in the end we added columns because it just saved so much money, it saved time, it made the heights, right? And you have a long beam, it gets deeper if you're doing steel. So now I got my heights back. You need your heights for ductwork, you need your heights to cross pipes. So engineering is a lot more technical. I don't expect executive directors and anyone in the school to really understand so much, but they have to understand what their finished ceiling height is. They have to understand how much space HVAC systems are taking. They have to understand, do I want split systems in all the classrooms, or do I want ductwork for everything? So that is where it comes to engineering. Same with civil engineering and all the other engineers that come up. Another big one, which is very personal taste, is interior design. The interior designer that is not familiar with schools, just like an architect, will kill your project. They won't understand durability with kids. Kids destroy things in schools.
No. Not all boys.
No. Girls are so much easier. So, having an interior designer that really knows schools is important. Another thing to understand with interior designers is, a lot of times, whether they're male, female, or whatever, sometimes they wake up and say they're interior designers, just because they show you something on Instagram. It's very important to know that your interior designer is going to give you real drawings. They're not going to give you halfway, and then the architect complains because you can't coordinate. A lot of times, let's look at this room. You need a lighting consultant to make sure that when you're sitting at a table reading something, that light reaches there, it's strong enough, it's powerful enough, it's the right temperature, color. If you have an interior designer that doesn't really understand this, it's a problem. If you have an interior designer that doesn't understand furniture moving in and out in a school, different uses, doesn't know how to pick the right millwork. It goes on and on where interior designer is so important, every little thing.
This interior designer needs to work with an engineer.
This one. Yeah.
This one for sure.
It doesn't mean you do a good job.
And I would be sitting on the fixture.
What?
And I wouldn't want to sit on the fixture.
I'm not talking about structural, I'm talking about lighting.
That fixture needs structural support.
Correct. So I do interior design drawings that have this gorgeous fixture and it floats in midair. Yes, which is what you're talking about. I get that all the time. I get that with so many different things that they design and they put it on the drawings and they just assume that everything's gonna work out structurally.
Or the donor wants to give a Trihuli, but no one has a ceiling that goes up 3 stories.
Shoes are expensive.
I said, a donor.
So having the right interior designer is very important. You get all the details right, you make sure the details work, and do the whole process. Okay,
Yes, you're running out of time.
What?
You're running out of time.
Okay, so last few things is consultants versus vendors. Sometimes you want to hire a vendor versus a consultant, like elevator, low voltage, and we go through that on the side. Okay, budget. Understanding your budget, soft costs and hard costs. Soft costs are all your design fees. Everything on the design side. Sometimes it includes land, closing costs if you're purchasing a property. Depends how you lay it out. Some people consider it a separate item. Hard costs are all the construction that you're dealing with. Then the last things are FF&E, which I put in as everything else, is basically if you turn over a building, everything that falls out is FF&E. That's usually how it's described. The next thing is you have understanding your payment schedule with the redesign spiral, right? So if you are confident you do it, then your design is done. If you change it, you're good. But if you keep on redesigning, you're getting change orders constantly. And therefore, you have to understand your payment schedule, how much money you need in the front versus how much money you need along the way. So it's very important because some people have donors that pledge, but they don't give you the money until later on. So you have to have money in the bank to make it happen. The other things are just basics that construction loans take time. You don't want to wait till right before construction to start doing that. Same with insurance. Insurance takes time. Insurance takes time to get and grants and rebates. So you need it, you can't wait till the last minute. Okay, these are pretty quick. You really have to understand this, that I'll just read it quickly, is what you can afford versus what you need and want, what you can fundraise, what you can finance, what you're legally allowed to build, your grants and rebates, current funds, and if you have a very large outstanding AR, meaning donors that pledge stuff and haven't given it yet. Well, having all these things at your fingertips, when you start laying out your budget and seeing what the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years for money you have to lay out. Okay, another thing which I started doing is hiring a GC as a consultant a little bit early on, because he'll tell you that a steel beam, 40 feet is too long. You do 30 feet, tons cheaper, right? If you want to do concrete versus steel, if you want to do splits versus ductwork, if you want to do concrete block versus sheetrock, everything that you want to ask to save you money, you want to do it now, so it's in the drawings, not that it's in the drawings. You start the construction, you're starting to get pricing, and all of a sudden, block is too expensive, let's switch to sheetrock. Now we got to redo the drawings, we got to redo the structure, we got to resubmit. You don't want to do it. So hiring a GC as a consultant early on, it's worth it if you have the right GC consultant. For them, they want to do it because it's the foot in the door to build a building. They get the first dibs. So to think about that. Okay, these are the things that could cripple a project, and we could go through them after we're running out of time, but we could go through them after you want. But having, like for example, on one project, I'm remapping a street. Before I came on, it's been 7 years they've been working on it. We came on, we're almost at the tail end. They would not be able to build their building, they wouldn't get approval without it. They kind of didn't pay attention to it right away, so what happens? Now that we're in the guts and everything's designed, we kind of have to put everything on hold until we get the approval. So all these type of things, encroachments, neighborhood objections, any putting properties together, these things take a lot of time to get done through the red tape. So kicking down the road, even though you're not ready, doesn't make a difference. Let's get ready, so then when you do design, you're there. Designing for donors is what I was talking about before, and you can actually see on this project that we started doing slabs of granite and marble or porcelain on different buildings to give the donors different places to put it, instead of just having that front. And there's 6 of them on these 2 buildings. You have on the front, you have on the back. Okay, this is easy, but you can't forget about it. These are all the little details that come through: smart boards, whiteboards, interior windows. You have offices with windows, delivery storage, copy areas. These things come, and then there's little changes. If you can get these done earlier, better. It's not a must, but it's just a more refined project. These are the things I was talking about before, things that are overlooked and revised. So you have kitchen design, people kick it down the road. Exterior master planning, which, as you can see over there, I started a separate company just for that, is that all the play space, the landscape, the hardscape, the playground, some projects at the pool, outdoor classrooms, event space outside, how people are getting into the property, security, dismissal, arrivals, all that stuff. People tend to focus only on the building, also budget-wise, because the numbers I just gave, I said before, hard bus, soft bus, exterior design, separate item usually. That gets kicked down the road, and people get killed on drainage and other things that cost so much money. playground is, here's a grant in a second. Okay, private bathrooms comes up a lot, especially for the dean principals. Even though I asked the question, they're like, last minute, okay, let's just throw it in. So that's another thing, save for our coverage and for money. Revised items are resource management, the big one, it's just a growing item. And the rest are pretty small, but it's just an overall. This is what we're talking about the whole time, preventing change orders. Doing all this stuff before, I have projects that have almost no change orders. They just don't, because everything was planned out. Unless they really changed the use that was not there when we designed. This is one thing that people tend to forget to think about. They're focused on the building of the project, but when the project's done and you're in the building, you went from 20,000 to 50,000 square feet. Your 20,000 was costing you, I don't know, 100 grand a month to run. Now you're almost triple all your operations, all your bathrooms, all your utilities, all the cleanliness. You need more security. You need more maintenance staff. You need more everything that you're doing, including inspections, all this stuff is going to cost you the size of the building.
What metrics do you use that's helpful, especially for cleaning periods?
You can use multiple.
Meaning
How many toilets you have now, which is how much toilet paper you're using, multiply it, what you're gonna have in the new building, if it's the same amount of kids, more kids, that have to put you over.
That's what I was trying to figure out the best
I actually feel better.
Right, so utilities, hopefully you get more efficient, equipment, and rebates, and things like that. So hopefully it's better glass, so that, so things go up and down, you have to be aware of it. And this is, which I was, interlacing through the whole thing, we take all this on. That's what we do. We go through all of it, and we make sure that all these things that we talked about are actually done. We push you very hard. We make you do all these reports, all these spreadsheets. We make you answer the questions. And hopefully, by the time you get to the finish line, you have a building that you really, really want. Everything's in the right place, everything's the right size. Most things that I've thought about. Like I said, there is 10 to 50% change based on, if building starts in year 1, and then in year 4 or 5, you're done. Obviously, things change, whether it's the world, whether it's cost, whether it's your growth. But that's where it comes from.
You don't actually do the construction part, just everything related.
The one thing I don't do is I don't do construction management. I approve every payment for the contractor, but I don't go to the site. If he doesn't show up, we don't do that. If he doesn't have enough guys, we don't do that. If the studs are wrong, we don't do that. The layout, we do. I'm on site a lot anyways, just by default, but I don't do that. Yes.
What's your opinion of using a design-build firm versus two separate companies?
Never done it.
You've never what?
I've never done it. Never done it because it's a conflict of interest a lot. Meaning, if they design something expensive and the contractor says, great, who's to say, I'll push back, but usually the schools don't know what to push back on. So there's no church and state.
But isn't the trade-off of that though that if sometimes there's machlokas between architect and GC?
Correct.
And there's a lot of finger pointing, and we, the client, often the executive director, is in the middle of that conversation, and then you got to get attorneys involved. Isn't that the trade-off or the advantage of the design build? I'm not I'm advocating for it. I'm just saying, isn't that the reason?
It depends what the conflict is. What's the conflict?
You're stuck now, something's not working, and each one says it's the other guy's fault, he has to change it, he has to change it.
We just did a design build with the renovation this past summer, and we were thrilled with that. We got it done much quicker, we felt, because everyone was on board and decisions were made much quicker. And so, but some people have told us that they don't, like that. But we were very happy.
I could see how it could work well, but I also could see how no one's watching the clock, and it could just, okay, they wanted that still being, contractors like, okay, I trust these guys.
Well, we had an owner's rep also working on our behalf.
On the construction side.
Yeah.
Right. By the time it gets to the construction side, it's too late. Meaning, they're not going to change the steel beam once you're starting construction. Well, it depends when you hire the construction owner's rep. Right? If you hire him in the beginning of the project.
Right in the beginning.
Very good. Okay, so then did he change a lot of stuff?
Some.
Which is the problem, because I've been on projects where they had construction owners rep. I came on board, but they didn't really do much. They were waiting for the construction. Yes, they did some budgets. Yes, they made some comments, but they weren't in the guts of the design. If you're not in the guts of the design, it's only going to help you towards the end. When you start the end of design, beginning of construction. That's the thing. But design build court, I personally have not done it. Anyone else? Questions?